Earnings calls are one of the best signals in trading, right? Management tone, what they avoid answering, whether the guidance went up or down, all of it matters. But the problem is that they're long. An hour of scripted corporate speak, then Q&A, and by the time you've read through the whole thing, you probably missed whatever the move was that was going to happen from it. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to build a script that reads an earnings call transcript and pulls out everything that matters in about 30 seconds. I'm going to show you exactly how it works so you can extend it for your own use case, right? If you're tracking 20 different names, you can't sit through 20 hours of earnings calls every quarter. Or maybe you can, but you're just going to be miserable. So we want a way to process these transcripts very quickly. And that's what we're going to build here in this code. So this is about 150 lines of Python, and we're going to use the Claude API to read the transcript and return a structured analysis that gives us, was it a beat or a miss? What is the guidance direction? How is management's confidence? Anything that's a risk flag, basically the whole thing. So let me basically walk you through how it's built, and then we'll run it on a real transcript. So the whole script comes down to three building blocks that come together very cleanly. The first is a Pydantic model. So this is going to basically structure our data, what we're expecting to get back. And I'll go into this in detail in a second. I'm just giving you the high level. Then a system prompt and an API call. And then finally, just getting our nice clean output and then printing it out to the system. So that's pretty much it. The power is in how these three different pieces connect. So let's go into each one in a little bit more detail. So first we have our Pydantic model here. This is called the earnings analysis class. And basically every field here becomes part of what we're asking Claude to return. So a few things to understand. We have a couple literal types here. You can see like the revenue result and the EPS result. These constrain the output to be specific values, right? So when it says revenue result, it has to be a beat, a miss, inline, or unknown. This just gives us, some structure on what Claude returns, because otherwise, it could sometimes with these AI models, there's a little bit of randomness, right? So this just enforces what we expect from it to come back. And it's very important to do this, especially if we're storing the results in a database or running comparisons across quarters. This really increases the cleanliness of our data set. So that is the literal object here. Another thing we're using is this object called a field. So this isn't just documentation. This description string actually gets injected into the prompt that Claude sees, right? So for example, when I look at this risk flags one, for example, we say some things to look for, topics management avoided or hedged or evasive about. That means Claude will literally receive that description as an instruction. And this is also part of the mechanism that makes the structured output work. You're defining the schema and the prompt basically at the exact same time. Another thing you'll notice about parameters like the risk flags here and the key themes is that it's going to actually return a list of strings. So in these cases, there might be multiple items that get returned, and Claude can decide how many based on what's in the transcript, right? So we're not hard coding a fixed number, we're letting it surface what's actually there. Now let's take a look at the system prompt here. So this is what we're actually going to feed into Claude when we run the script. We say, you are an experienced sell-side equity analyst. Your job is to cut through the management spin and identify what is really happening in a business. When analyzing an earnings call, look for what management emphasizes versus what they avoid. Pay attention to hedging language, things like headwinds, challenging, transitioning. I'm sure if you've listened to enough of these calls yourself, you're pretty familiar with that sort of thing. And then notice when they pivot away from analyst questions, or if there's just any sort of contentiousness or negative sentiment, read the analyst tone. Are they pressing hard, or are they accepting the answers at face value? And then compare what management says to what the numbers show. And again, we're just prompting it, make sure to be direct and analytical and look for what isn't said as much as what is said. So a couple just key points about this prompt here. Obviously the role matters, right? We want to give Claude a specific identity, a specific lens to apply. You can compare that to just saying, hey, Claude, analyze this earnings call. You get a much more vanilla output. So this just makes sure that it really gives a detailed kind of structured output. The bullet points are like a typical kind of behavioral instruction. This is just a checklist of things for it to do, so it doesn't miss anything that we want to make sure it has. And obviously you can tweak this as you want, because really in this whole process, the prompt quality is going to be the main lever that you have, right? So if you're specifically interested in, let's say, biotech companies and transcripts, you might want to rewrite this to look for, mentions of FDA timelines or trial readouts or cash runway. If you're tracking retail, you might want to look at same store sales and inventory, capital expenditure, whatever it is. So you can adapt this system prompt in this model to whatever framing you give it. It's really just about chaining these pieces together and then customizing this to be as effective as possible for your particular situation. And now the last piece of this script here is the analyze earnings call function. So this is pretty simple. We're going to give it a transcript, a ticker, and a quarter. This is going to be like its main inputs, and it's going to send that off to Claude to analyze and put back into the correct format, right? So you'll see here we pass our system prompt, We said that our model, right now I'm using Claude Opus 4.6. You can use whatever you want. And then it's going to make sure that the output format is in that type earnings analysis that we defined up at the top of the file. So this is all the data that we're going to pull back from our prompt, right? And that's pretty much it. That's going to return the parsed output. And then down here, we just have a little helper function to print the results in a very clean format. At the end of it all, we have our, if name equals main block. And this is basically going to let us pass in the flags from the command line, run our API call, and then print out the result. Now let's go ahead and run it on a real transcript. So up here, I have an example transcript that I downloaded from just a couple of days ago. You can see I got it from marketbeat.com. I just pasted the URL in here. And this is for Rex American Resources, their Q4 report for the last fiscal year. And you can see, right, it's just broken down speaker 1 with some timestamps, operator, speaker 4. It's pretty generic. And if I scroll horizontally, right, you can see all this stuff. But I literally just copied and pasted this from the website. You might be able to do this, programmatically if you want. But this is going to be the input that we pass into the script. So what I'm going to do is down here in my terminal, and then let me actually paste the command in here once more, and let's run it. So now you can see it's running behind the scenes. Give it a minute to resolve. And here is the output. So let me make this a little bit bigger. So yeah, here's the actual read from the transcript that it did. And then it says our revenue is not sure, EPS was a beat, guidance was raised, management confidence was a 9 out of 10. We have some key themes here, some risk flags, analyst sentiment overall was positive, and then we have a final summary down here that kind of captures the main takeaways. This will also save this out to a JSON file here. So you can see now I have kind of my process stored data here. So I can refer back to this later or feed this into another AI prompt if I want to maybe compare this quarter to a previous quarter, right? There's all sorts of things you could do with this. So that's the kind of analysis that, would generally take an analyst an hour to pull together manually. You have to sit on the call, take notes, and ultimately summarize all this stuff yourself. But when you have a tool like this and when you're taking advantage of the combination of Claude with Python, you can do this in about 30 seconds. It's pretty powerful. Okay, guys, so that's basically the full build. So just to quickly recap, we have 3 components. The first is our Pydantic data model that's going to define the output. Then we have our system prompt that's going to define the exact analytical lens that we want the AI to do. And then finally, we have our function that's basically just a wrapper on this API call here that's going to connect them together. So if you want to grab this code as well as the prompt and all the files that I'm using to develop this, will be the top link in the description below. In order to use this, you will also need to set up an Anthropic API key, but that's not really too hard. And there's a lot of steps that we could take this further, right? So we could try to fetch transcripts automatically instead of feeding them in manually. We could store the results in a database to compare across multiple quarters. We could have a screen that flags companies where the confidence is changing or risk flags are going up. There's all kinds of extensions we could do with this. So if this was useful and you want to see more things like this, let me know below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.